This is Game Night with Josh Hennig on 97.3 ESPN and the free mobile app. Now, live from the Matt Black Kia Studios.
What a move!
Here's Josh Hennig.
Tuesday edition of Game Night on 97.3 ESPN FM. Live here in the Matt Black Kia Studios, hanging out with you for another edition of the show. Sixers back in action tonight, taking on the Denver Nuggets. Of course, it'll be Jokic versus a bunch of guys who can't guard him tonight. And it'll be a bunch of guys who can't guard Ben Simmons. Because if you really think that Aaron Gordon is going to stop Ben Simmons, you haven't watched a single Sixers Magic game this year. Seriously, though, really quick, before we get to the Eagles stuff, can I just say this? I thought the funniest thing I heard for the NBA trade deadline was, well, they're acquiring Aaron Gordon for his defensive prowess. And I was like, wait a minute. When did Aaron Gordon become a defensive stopper? I mean, he's a very athletic guy and he's a solid defender, but if you're acquiring Aaron Gordon to be your guy to slow down LeBron and Luka in the West, yikes. Good luck, Nuggets. We're all counting on you. All right, anyway, we got a lot to get to. We got to talk Sixers, obviously, tonight. Jason Blevins, our Sixers reporter over at 97.3 ESPN.com, will join us coming up at 6:20 tonight. So we'll get into the Sixers talk with him. Then we got to get into the Eagles and the NFL draft stuff because it feels like the world just keeps spinning when it comes to a lot of this stuff. And when I start looking at the NFL draft, and I'm working on a piece right now for 97.3 ESPN.com after my conversation with Emery Hunt last night, and the more I dig deeper into this draft, as the weeks get closer and closer, the more I realize that this whole situation with the NFL draft could be completely what we expect and completely what we not expect. And I'm not basing that on anything except for what we already know, which is every year the NFL draft has something that we don't expect. And when I look at the Eagles sitting at 12, I can tell you who I think they should pick and who they shouldn't pick. But what fascinates me about this draft is I keep coming back to what happens with the quarterbacks. Because we all assume that there's three quarterbacks going in the top three picks. But after that, it's anybody's guess. Because Atlanta, they could pick a quarterback. They could have a team come up and trade for a quarterback. You can see a quarterback drop to maybe 7 or 8 or 9. No one says Denver has to not take a quarterback. No one says they have to stick with Drew Lock. What if you're a team like Denver and you call Atlanta and you trade up? What if the Panthers trade up to 4 for Atlanta? And whatever happens with the quarterbacks is going to create a massive, massive domino effect the rest of the board. And that's part of the reason why if you're the Eagles and you trade down to go to 12th overall, you're trading down in part because you realize that all these quarterbacks are going to make everybody in the draft lose their minds. There are going to be some irrational decisions on draft night because when it comes to quarterbacks, there's always irrational moves. Mitch Trubisky was the first quarterback drafted in the year that had Patrick Mahomes and Deshaun Watson. Paxton Lynch was the third quarterback picked in the 2016 NFL draft, which means he was picked ahead of Dak Prescott. Okay? Every year there's some horrible decisions that are made because teams get desperate about quarterbacks. And I'm not going to sit here and project, who is going to be a bust and who is not, but I can guarantee you that not every quarterback that we're talking so highly of right now is going to play as well as they say they're going to play. We can only project what someone is going to be. We can't always tell you exactly how it's going to play out. And I think when it comes to this organization, I think that you have to realize for the Eagles that teams are going to make decisions ahead of you and things are just going to fall into place. They're just going to fall into your lap. It's just going to happen that way. Now, whether that is a receiver like Jalen Waddle, whether that's a cornerback like J.C. Horn, whether that's, as the guy at CBS Sports thinks, Kyle Pitts, which I don't think is going to happen, but all right, fine. I'm not gonna rain everybody's parade, right? I think that when it comes to this situation, the Eagles are in a prime position to get some really amazing talent. But as I said about 15 minutes ago on the Sports Bash, I just hope and pray that they don't overthink the situation. Having a need and picking the best player are two completely different things. And I have zero interest in drafting for need exclusively in the first round. There is no way that a defensive end is the best player on anybody's board at 12th overall. In fact, listen, I think Rousseau is going to be a nice player, but I have no belief that he's going to be a top-tier player. So when it comes to the Eagles, they're in a prime position to let the quarterbacks ahead of them dictate the draft board, because there's no way if 5 quarterbacks go in the top 10 that you're going to end up with a bad player, or even 4, and you end up with a bad player. Because that means there are 7 guys who are going to be after that, or even 8, or even 6. Whatever the number is, you're going to get a good player. And that's exciting. And I know some people are worried the Eagles will mess it up or ruin it or find a way to, drop the ball. Let's see how that plays out first. There have been mistakes made by the Eagles, but there are mistakes made by everybody. There is not anybody who's ever drafted in the NFL who's made mistakes. So I think that this is as close an opportunity as you have to having a surefire hit as humanly possible. All right. And I think that is because of the quarterback. You don't need a quarterback if you're the Eagles. Let's see what Jalen Hurts is. Because Emery told us last night that he looks at Hurts and says he's similar to Fields, and he has him graded right behind Zach Wilson.
He's more along the lines of, Justin Fields. They're about the same type of guy. I have a slightly higher grade on Zach Wilson, but Jalen Hurts is right there, right behind him.
Jalen Hurts is right there, right behind him, he says. That's some high praise, man. That's some serious clout right there, to say you're right behind a guy like Zach Wilson, that you're compared right to Justin Fields. And it's not just Emery Hunt saying that. This is Greg Cosell on Inside the Birds, a new show on the Inside the Birds podcasting network with Greg Cosell, said this is what an NFL quarterback coach told him.
A quarterback coach I know extremely well, who's been in the league for 25 years, told me that he thought that Justin Fields and Jalen Hurts were very similar prospects coming out of college.
So if Justin Fields is going to be a top 10 pick, and him and Hurts are basically very similar players, then no wonder you traded down. It completely makes sense. You basically have the player you already need. It completely makes sense. And you know what? I'm cool with that. I am absolutely fine with that. You need to fill other voids. This team has a lot of needs. A lot of needs. Cornerback, linebacker. How about a backup running back, for goodness sake, who's not, Corey Clement, because apparently he's the only guy you've been able to find in the last few years who could be a backup running back. I mean, they had Josh Adams for a hot minute, but they let him walk. You need somebody. And this team needs to go all in on these picks. So let the teams ahead of you fight over the quarterbacks. Let them argue about who they should draft, which wide receiver, right? Let them argue about all that stuff. Because you're playing in the NFC East. You're not playing just the rest of the NFL all the time. You got to play the Giants, the Cowboys, and Washington twice a year. And you know what all three of those teams have in common? Wide receivers. Kenny Galladay, Darius Slayton, Terry McLaurin, Curtis Samuel, Amari Cooper, CeeDee Lamb, Michael Gallup. Who the heck is guarding those guys? I'm not available. My knees are shot. So, Eagles, you better draft some defensive players in this draft. You better find a way to get some defense in this draft. Because at the end of the day, you can't outscore everybody. You know how I know that? Because the New Orleans Saints have been back to the Super Bowl in over 10 years. And they tried to outscore their defense a lot in the last 10 years with a future Hall of Famer in Drew Brees, and it didn't work. Dear Eagles on letterhead, draft defense. Sincerely, Eagles fans who are tired of seeing Avante Maddox, Cravon LeBlanc, Kavion Seymour, and etc. get burned by really good speed receivers. Go get some cornerbacks. That's what I say. 609-403-0973 is the text board to get in on the conversation. Yeah, not quarterback, cornerbacks. 609-403-0973 is the text board. Josh Hennig here on GameNight on 97.3 ESPN. Get to come to your comments in just a minute. Don't forget, coming up at 6:20 tonight. I want to get to first the comment here. Now, I'm going to do my best here because I'm moving a text board over to the video stream. We are live on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. We can watch the show here on 97.3 ESPN on social media platforms. I try to give you guys the quotes from the text board on the video stream. So just give me a hot second while we cue that up. We have a texter who's talking about the Eagles. Basically, a texter feels like they should draft the linebackers. So here we go. 609-403-0973 texter says, Antonio Gibson, Saquon Barkley, Ezekiel Elliott, the linebackers don't have it any easier. Hopefully it's Parsons, because I think that fills the biggest need for the Eagles. That's on the text board at 609-403-0973. A couple things, texter. One, first of all, Antonio Gibson and Saquon Barkley are not pure runners. So you also need someone who can cover running backs. So I don't really think Parsons is really a coverage linebacker. To me, Parsons is always more of a hitter and a blitzer than he is a coverage linebacker. That's just my perception of everything I've read and heard about him as a player. So maybe Micah Parsons is not the guy to be covering Gibson and Barkley in space. And I don't even know how many years Ezekiel Elliott's going to be on the Cowboys. I mean that sincerely. I've been thinking about this a lot. You know, if you go back and look at Ezekiel Elliott's contract, you got to wonder, how much longer is he going to be a Cowboy? How much longer is Zeke going to be able to play at the level he is and stay on the Cowboys? That contract right now has about 2 more years of guaranteed money, and then all of a sudden the guaranteed money goes away. 2023 onward, there's no guaranteed money on that contract. The Cowboys can get out of that deal after the 2022 season. In 2023, he'll be 28 years old. I have to wonder, how much longer is he going to be a Cowboy? Just putting it out there. No guaranteed money after the next 2 years. 2021, 2022, guaranteed money, gone. And it's not like he's played like he used to. All of a sudden, the offensive line gets injured. Zeke doesn't have the big holes to run through anymore. He certainly is not Emmett, that's for sure. So, I understand what you're saying, Texter. I agree. They need linebackers. But I don't know if Parsons is the guy to help you deal with Gibson, Barkley, Elliott, and all the guys in the league. Whereas there might be some other guys who might just be as good that you can get in the later rounds. Because in the later rounds, you can get some really, really good players. You don't have to always get a guy in the first round. You can get a guy later in the draft who's just as good. A couple more texts in here to get to. 609-403-0973. Texter chimes in and says, I don't think that comment is as prestigious as you think it is. Those two guys haven't played a snap in the NFL and could end up a bust. Well, first of all, Hurts has played a couple snaps. So unless you're talking about Zach Wilson and Fields, but I'm going to assume we're kind of on the same conversation. Listen, the point of the comment was that when you're evaluating quarterbacks, all right, you have to do a little bit of comparison and contrast, right? And if you're telling me that Jalen Hurts and Justin Fields and Zach Wilson are all evaluated around the same potential, then you're not really losing out on anything. I think you're misconstruing the comment. The comment is that you trade down the draft because you know these quarterbacks are going to go high and that you don't need a quarterback. And if your quarterback is in the same realm in terms of potential and ability as the guys who are going to be drafted in that class, that says something about your quarterback. All right, we'll get more text messages coming up. 609-403-0973. We're also live on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. So the text board is 609-403-0973. Josh Hennig here on 97.3 ESPN FM, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter. We are live each and every day here on Game Night on 97.3 ESPN. Sixers back in action tonight, taking on the Nuggets. We'll get into more on the Sixers next with Jason Blevins from 97.3 ESPN.com here on 97.3 ESPN FM. And don't forget the 97.3 ESPN mobile app for your Sixers, Flyers, Eagles, and Phillies coverage. It's free, thanks to First Bank of Seattle City.
You're listening to Game Night with Josh Hennig on 97.3 ESPN and the free mobile app.
Josh Hennig here on Game Night on 97.3 ESPN. We'll get to more of your texts about the Eagles and such at 609-403-0973 in just a bit. But joining us right now on the Boardwalk Kind of Hotline, at J Blevins NBA on Twitter. Catch all of his work over at 973ESPN.com. Him, Paul Hudrick, Kevin McCormick did a lot of great work covering a team over to the trade deadline and beyond. Jason, how you doing today?
I'm great. How are you, Josh?
Doing pretty good. Obviously, the Sixers, they're playing pretty well even without Embiid, and I think that's kind of where I want to start. How surprised or not surprised are you about how well this team has been able to do without their superstar on the floor?
Yeah, I think it's a reflection of just the calm, steady professionalism of their coach. So when you just watch him and you talk to him and you interact with him, he doesn't panic. He is calm, comfortable in his own skin, knows what this team does well. He spent that first couple of months really learning what he had in this team, and I think it's reflected in their play. They're just a professional team that grinds out some professional wins. So, it's hard to say much more than that.
One of the things that also impressed me about this team during this stretch, Jay, is that when you watch them on the court, it's so incredible to see guys like Dwight Howard, Danny Green, stepping up as these veteran leaders. And that's something that I think in the past this team was desperately missing, that kind of guy who's been around the block, been through different things, to kind of turn to the guys and be like, hey, things happen. Let's move on. Let's get to the next quarter kind of stuff.
I mean, Dwight has been ejected from the last two games, right?
Right, outside the last two games, right?
I mean, 2 games in a row when you don't have when your starter is out and you don't have a third string center.
Right.
But other than that, absolutely.
But still, like the Lakers game, Danny Green goes off. He has, what did he have, 8 threes in that game? It's just one of those deals where I just feel like when I'm watching this team, the veterans on this team, I feel like, are really making a difference in terms of leadership, and a leadership that I think was lacking for this team at certain points in the past.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think when things get really tight and sticky in the playoffs, you have a lot of experience where the moment won't be too big and they won't turn against each other. So I think there's some real cause for optimism there.
Sixers back in action tonight, 9 o'clock here on 97.3 ESPN, taking on the Nuggets in Denver. Now, Jay, what is your expectation for when Embiid is going to return? Because I know that the hope is that he could return when they get back home, but that's not a guarantee, correct?
No, but I think all signs are sort of indicating this weekend. So they've got a couple of games left, and I've seen nothing to indicate that he's going to fly out to meet the team, but also nothing to indicate that he wouldn't be ready for that first home game back. And I think that'll be really important because that first home game after a long West Coast trip is really tough. That is a tough game to win, actually.
Right, because the guys are tired from the trip. Their legs are tired, their minds are tired, and now you have Embiid walking on the court. It's almost like a little pick-me-up you get coming off of that trip, right?
Yeah, and he might, he might have a little bit of a letdown in that second game back, but he might work purely off of adrenaline and be able to pick up his teammates who are sort of emotionally, mentally, and physically exhausted. So it's a good time to come back.
Jason Blevins joining us here on Game Night on 97.3 ESPN at JBlevinsNBA on Twitter. He also wrote recently about the buyout candidates, and obviously the buyout situation has come and gone a little bit, but I thought the conversation that you put on Twitter about the different players was interesting because while some of those guys got picked up very quickly, the last name you had on your article is still hanging out there. What is going on with Boogie Cousins? Because I feel like that was the guy that I got asked the most about last Thursday and Friday, and he's still kind of just hanging out there.
Yeah, the two arguments against DeMarcus Cousins are, after those injuries, can he move well enough to defend the 5 position, much less the 4? And the other one is sort of his mercurial personality. Can he not be a distraction to a team that's trying to make a playoff run if he's frustrated in that sort of third center role? Is there some risk in bringing him into a solid, steady locker room? Now, the upside is that, at even 80% of his peak, here's a person that can stretch the floor. He can score in a variety of ways, and really provide you some scoring off the bench, and pressure defenses, and not give defenses or opposing teams a break when your starters are on the bench. So, I think it makes a lot of sense offensively on the floor, but I think the concerns are those two things I talked about.
Now, on the flip side, you tweeted about the idea, and obviously it hasn't happened yet, but there's a possibility that Marc Gasol could get bought out by the Lakers. First of all, I think that'd be a huge mistake by the Lakers because I think that he really helps facilitate the offense at times, especially without LeBron on the floor. But if he's on the market, if I'm Daryl Morey, I'm calling his agent and saying how much and where, because I think that guy brings a whole new element to the bench for the Sixers.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think people underestimate how much Joel Embiid looks up to Marc Gasol as a sort of a prototype for the kind of player he wanted to become early in his career. Like, Joel Embiid truly respects Marc Gasol, and I would be on the phone immediately if he were to agree to a buyout.
Yeah, and the other thing is that think about, you mentioned about how he looks up to people, that indelible memory of after the Raptors series. Who was Embiid with? He was with Gasol. He wasn't even with his teammates at first. So, I mean, that in and of itself should tell you what that guy would mean to him. And I can only imagine what Embiid could learn from a guy like that. I mean, both Gasol brothers, they were so fundamentally sound in terms of footwork and passing and everything. I mean, having more of those like high basketball IQ guys only makes the team better. I mean, so Embiid and Paul Reed and all those young guys, they could just be sponges with these guys.
Yeah, I mean, if I was Joel Embiid, and this conversation, I really truly don't think happened last year. But if I was Joel Embiid and Marc Gasol was on my team at 36 years old, I would say, okay, let's drop everything. How did you stop me? Like how did you find that exact perfect spot, not backing off so that I could shoot and not getting too close, letting me get you in foul trouble. Like, what were you doing to stop me? And really learn how someone else approaches defending you so that you can work on counters. Like that's also a conversation that I had thought would happen with Al Horford, who had some success defending Joel. Those two just didn't communicate with each other. Al Horford said from the first conversation I had with him, I'm not here to be a mentor. I'm here to play. So Horford didn't have that approach to pass down his wisdom to Joel. But I think Gasol, there's a huge opportunity for Joel to see how other players really think about him, players that have had success against him, and learn from that and get better. So to me, there's so many reasons why I would absolutely jump on that.
Jason Blevins joining us here on GameNight on 97.3 ESPN. Sixers back in action tonight versus the Nuggets at 9 p.m. Tom McGinnis on the call here on your radio home in South Jersey for Sixers basketball, 97.3 ESPN FM. Jason, I want to play a clip from you. Mark Jackson from NBC Sports Philly was on with the Sports with Mike Gill earlier, and this is what he said about George Hill. I want to get your reaction to this.
George Hill brings a lot of those same qualities that Kyle Lowry could bring. He's a defender. He's tough. He's a ball distributor. He can shoot the ball. He is going to fill in very well with this Sixers organization. Most importantly, it gives a chance to move Shake Milton to the two-guard spot.
What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mostly agree. I'm not sure that George Hill is quite the floor general and point guard that maybe he's being billed as. He's definitely a combo guard. I agree that it allows Shake Milton to be much more of a two-guard and attacking, offensive-minded green light type player, and that's a good thing. I agree that he is he's probably a guy that's a little less easy to be hunted on defense than some of the smaller guards. Yeah, the only thing that I hesitate with is the notion that he is like this Chris Paul level floor general. He's not.
Right, but he still has similar traits that he could bring to the table in terms of defense and things like that, which I think it gets overlooked because kind of the idea is his name isn't Kyle Lowry, so we don't think of him as this guy who can go out there and at the end of the day, you're not stopping the Nets. But if you can at least slow them down for a couple of plays here and there, it gives you the opportunity to get points on the other end for yourself.
Yeah, and I think it also allows Seth Curry to be a natural two-guard as well, because I don't think Seth Curry is truly a point guard either. So I don't think that's his strength. And so I think it will certainly help. I talked myself into and out of Kyle Lowry many times, so I'm glad that I no longer have to go through that thought exercise every day.
Right. Well, I'll ask you to go through another thought exercise, and that is, what do you think ultimately the Sixers' plan is for George Hill? Do you think they want him to maybe be, exclusively with the second unit? Is he maybe a guy that maybe they put in like the fourth quarter with the starters? How do you envision the Sixers using him?
I think he's a chess piece for a playoff series. So, it's 7-game series against the Nets. Does he start some of those games? Probably. Does he start all 7 of those games? Probably not. And I think that, is he on the floor in the last 2 minutes of those games? Probably. Is he part of the offense defense substitution down in the last minute of a game, of a close game? Because I think the Nets are built to just keep it close and then beat you in the last 2 minutes. It's pretty clear that's their strategy. So I think that he is a chess piece to be used by Doc Rivers in multiple ways, and I think it's a really valuable addition. But I don't think it's as simple as you plug him into your starting 5 and Seth Curry becomes the 6th man. It might be, but I'm just trying to think about how those 7-game series play out with moves, counters to those moves, and then counters to those counters. And I just think it will be neither team is very clearly better than the other. The Sixers are giving themselves more optionality in a series. And I think the Nets pretty much have their squad that they're going to be more of a stationary target to strategize against.
And who do you envision as the guy who loses the most minutes because of George Hill?
That's a good question. I hadn't even really thought of it that way. I'm going to say like Mike Scott, because I just think it's going to be like a downstream sort of domino effect, which when him being on the floor will allow Seth Curry and Shake Milton to play more 2, but also allow Ben Simmons to play more 4, which will allow I think it will just he will soak up the extra minutes at the 4, even though he's not playing the 4. Does that make sense? Because a Ben Simmons will shift over and play more 4 because of him being on the floor.
Right. What you're saying is less about specifically Mike Scott, about is the lineups that Doc will want to put out there with George Hill as kind of like a domino effect, correct?
Yeah, I think they're just going to go to smaller lineups. And I think there's going to be a domino effect. So I think Matisse Thybulle is fighting his way into the rotation defensively. So there's part of your minutes at the 3. It's probably not going to impact him. I don't think you're going to really reduce. I'd have to look at Seth Curry's minutes load, but I think Seth Curry is going to settle into that 24 minutes per game sort of role. And then Shake is probably going to be in that role as well. You've got 36 minutes that you're going to get from Ben, probably more like 38 to 40 in the playoffs. So you just do the math, and then, you're going to get 24 to 28 minutes from George Hill, probably. You do the math on all of that, and you say, okay, of that, how many of those minutes from Ben are going to be at the 1 versus at the 4? Because you're taking minutes at the 1, the 2, and the 4 when you put those 4 players together. So I'd have to do the math, but I think the net is the minutes will be taken away unless they sign a stretch 4 from the power forward position at the end of the day.
He's Jason Blevins. Follow him on Twitter at jblevinsnba. Check out his work over at 97.3 ESPN.com. Always great insights from him about the Sixers and the NBA. And as all guests, he appeared on the Boardwalk kind of hotline with the whiteboard behind him, as you see on the video, with, I believe that is about 25 plays overlapping each other with thought bubbles over there.
No, that is expected efficiency and expected points per shot per location on the floor. No plays on there. That is just, if you take a shot, NBA average from that spot on the floor, that's your expected points per shot.
Okay, so basically I'm the old man, get off my lawn, and you're the analytics guy then.
No, although I think we've done too much math already on this show.
I think we've meted our math quota. There's a reason why I went to all the social sciences as much as possible in college. Okay.
Yeah, I wasn't told there'd be math, but hey,
Well, I think you performed admirably. Okay, how about that?
thank you.
Jay, have a good one, man.
Thanks, you too.
Josh Hennig here on Game Night on 97.3 ESPN. We'll get back to your text coming up next. No math required. 609-403-0973 to get on the conversation here on Game Night on 97.3 ESPN FM, the free 97.3 ESPN mobile app powered by First Bank of Sea Isle City. And we are live in video in living color in YouTube, Twitter, and Facebook. Just follow at 973 ESPN. Your thoughts and comments next.
Now, more Game Night with Josh Hennig on 97.3 ESPN and the free mobile app.
Josh Hennig here on Game Night on 97.3 ESPN. We'll get back to your thoughts and texts in just a moment at 609-403-0973. I want to remind you of my friends over at FanDuel Sportsbook. There's always that one team that ruins your bracket. I'm sure some of you are going to have more of your brackets ruined tonight. By the way, the Elite Eight next on 97.3 ESPN before we head into Sixers versus Nuggets at 9 p.m. FanDuel Sportsbook is where I've been going because FanDuel Sportsbook wants to make you a millionaire. That's right, you. They're giving away $1 million to a lucky bettor. New and existing users get an additional shot at the payout every day you bet the tourney. So even if your bracket is busted, even if your bet doesn't work out, you're still qualified for a chance to win $1 million with FanDuel Sportsbook. So if you want a shot to become a millionaire or even a thousandaire, download the FanDuel Sportsbook app. Use my promo code Hennig to get in on all the action with the tournament. And with FanDuel, if you're a new user, your first bet is risk-free. New users get up to $1,000 back in site credit if your first bet doesn't win. So don't miss out. Use my promo code Hennig when you sign up with FanDuel Sportsbook. Must be 21 or older, play in present NJRPA, no purchase necessary. Restrictions apply for $1 million drawing, risk-free offer for first online real money wager only. Site credit is non-withdrawable and expires in 14 days. Restrictions apply. See sportsbook.fanduel.com for details. Gambling problem, call 1-800-GAMBLER. All right, get some of your texts in here. The text board has been loading up at 609-403-0973. We mentioned linebackers a little bit earlier. A texter chimed in and says, Josh, what are your thoughts on Chaz Surratt as a linebacker pick? So those who don't know, Chaz is from the University of North Carolina. So he's a Tar Heel. And this is a very interesting guy to bring up because, so here's the problem. First of all, I like what Surratt can bring to the table. But the problem with him is that for as productive as he was for the last couple of years in college, he doesn't have the football experience of a linebacker long term. Remember, he transitioned to linebacker before the 2019 season. He actually played a bunch of other positions in high school and initially when he tried to get to college. So he was a quarterback. He was transitioned to linebacker. He was actually a red shirt his freshman year behind Mitch Trubisky. So if you're the Eagles, do you want another potential project? I think that he's an elite athlete. I think that he is phenomenal in pass coverage. I love him as a pass coverage linebacker in the NFL. I think his biggest problem, though, is that he's not a big thumper. He's not a guy who's going to hit guys in the box very much. I don't think he's a guy who's going to fill the holes and hit guys in the box. He's a willing tackler, though. He doesn't run away from contact. But I think that if you look at an NFL draft where Micah Parsons, Dylan Moses, Nick Bolton, Xavion Collins, these are all guys that are going to be your top linebackers. Surratt's probably the next tier down. And while I think he makes sense for what the Eagles want to do with Jonathan Gannon's defense, I think that if he's the only linebacker you walk out of the draft with, that's a problem. The problem is if you walk out of the draft with him, I'm not loving your draft picks. If he's one of two linebackers you walk out of the draft with, then I'm all on board. I'm liking it. Again, I think Surratt is a guy who's a great dime nickel linebacker in coverage. He could definitely cover the majority of running backs and tight ends in this league. He probably is a guy who can be a gunner on special teams as well, so he can kind of play a dual role for you. So I like the name. I like you bringing him up. My only concern is that I think he might be a tiny bit of a project at some point. So, but good question. I like the name. I like the outside-the-box thinking. 609-403-0973 is the text board. 609-403-0973. Also, we are live on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. You can get in the conversation here on 97.3 ESPN. Texter chimes in and says, hey, Josh, who do you think was the better cornerback tandem? Lito Shepherd and Sheldon Brown, or Troy Vincent and Bobby Taylor? So, all right, I'm going to answer this not in a literal apples-to-apples comparison. I'm going to answer this in more of a logistical comparison. I think most people would attest to that Taylor and Vincent were the more accomplished cornerbacks in their career, okay? You know, Bobby Taylor was a Pro Bowler. Troy Vincent was an All-Pro. They were both very good players, all right? They were both really, and they were really great for the Eagles when they were here. But I'm not fully sure if it's an apples-to-apples comparison, because I think Sheldon Brown and Lito Shepherd were more suited for the modern game than Taylor and Vincent were. So for Taylor and Vincent, they were a great cornerback combo for the 90s, but Shepherd was a great cornerback combo for the 2000s in the passing era. That's kind of how I would quantify it. I mean, if you're going to force me to pick between the two duos, I mean, Taylor and Vincent were more accomplished. They were more widely recognized around the league. I thought that Troy Vincent is an extremely underrated cornerback in league history over the last 30 years. But I think so is Lito Shepherd. And ideally, if you had a cornerback tandem of Shepherd and Vincent, so if it was Shepherd and Vincent in their prime, that's probably the best cornerback duo in the league, hands down. But I would lean to Vincent and Taylor, because I think Vincent is better than both Brown and Shepherd, and I think that Taylor is slightly better than both of those guys. But here's the thing. I think Brown and Shepherd were better cover corners than Taylor were. I think Taylor was a little handsy. He was more of he wasn't a guy who was going to be a pure cover guy at times. So it's an interesting question, though. Another text in here, 609-403-0973. The texter says, ultimately, the Eagles need defense bad. I think more highly of Parsons than you do. That's for sure. But I hate the linebacker situation more than I hate the corner situation. And guess what? I'm the opposite. I hate the corner situation more than the linebacker situation, because at the end of the day, how much are linebackers really going to be on the field? How much are we actually going to see those linebackers on the field throughout the season? Typically, in a lot of formations now, you only have one or two linebackers. And if you get a good safety who could be a box safety, who can maybe be a little bit of a nickel or a dime linebacker, then you're only asking one of your linebackers onto the field. So to me, it's a numbers game. I'm less concerned about the linebackers because I think there needs to be less of them on the field, whereas I'm more concerned about the corners because there needs to be more of them on the field, because so many teams run 3-4 wide receiver sets. And I don't want Kayvon Wallace covering a slot receiver. That's just me. All right, great text, great conversation. Thanks, Jason Blevins, for joining us on the show tonight. Coming up next, the Elite Eight, followed by Sixers versus Nuggets here on 97.3 ESPN.